So let's imagine, folks, that I ask you to raise your arm. I ask you to raise your arm. So essentially, at the end of this, you got to look like this. Okay? So I ask you to raise your arm. So I want you to go from this state to this state. What's going on here? It is the arm that was raised, wasn't it? Wasn't it? When I ask you to raise your arm, it would actually work out really nicely if you want to follow this through as I explain this. If it's safe to do so, I don't know where you are listening to this sermon, but if it's safe to do so, just follow with me, right? Imagine you are in the monastery, and I was doing the sermon on the stage, and then I'd ask you to actually do this as an experiment, and then, because then it'll be a lot easier for you to understand what I'm trying to explain to you here, right? Okay, so raise your arm. Okay, smart ones among you. Okay, left arm. You didn't say which arm, Swami, no, so I don't know which one to raise. All right. Left arm. Raise your left arm. What did you just do there? Did you raise your left arm? Let's try that again. Put your arm back down. Okay, now raise your arm. Raise your left arm. No, I asked you to raise your left arm. You're not getting it, are you? Okay, put your arm back down again. Okay, now please listen carefully. Listen carefully and raise your left arm. You're not doing what I'm asking you to do. Now, I know you're confused at this point because you're wondering, Swaminath, you can't even see what we're doing, so how the heck are you saying that we're not doing what you're asking us to do? Let alone, why are you even saying I'm not raising my left arm? This is my left arm and I've got it raised. If I raise it anymore, I'm going to hit the ceiling. What are you talking about? Alright, let me explain. I asked you to raise your left arm. What are you actually doing? Let's walk closer. Let's go closer to your left arm and let's see what's really happening there. Right? There are muscles in your arm, aren't there? The muscles that surround the bones on your arm, right? I asked you to raise your arm, and what you're doing is you're clenching those muscles. You're contracting those muscles. What did I ask you to do? I asked you to raise your arm. What are you really doing? You're contracting your muscles. Is that what I asked you to do? Right? Think about this. I'm showing you a way to practice Kaya nupassana, because if you get this, folks, you can, especially the gentleman who asked the question, you will find an answer to your problem. You'll be free. Isn't that what you're looking for? You're looking for freedom. You are so... You'll excuse me for saying it this way. You are suffering from this problem so much that you wanted to type it out. You took the effort, you took the time, in and amongst your busy schedule, you took the time to type it out and send it to us. Meaning, it can't be just any old problem. It has to be a problem that you are serious about. It's bothering you, is it not? It's something you want to break free from, is it not? It's something that's keeping you in captivity, and you want to break free, is it not? I'm trying to help you here. You have asked for help, and I'm trying to help you here. So, pay attention, follow through this with me, and I promise you, if you get this concept, all of you, You'll all be free from all those pesky annoyances, wherever, all those instances where you thought the mind was willing but the flesh is weak. You'll be able to free yourself from that. This is Kaya nupassana. Contemplation on the body. Right, you still got your arm raised? Okay, put it down. Right, take a deep breath. Relax yourself. Right, okay. Put that arm up again, up back again. Now, put your arm back up again. Right, again, you're not doing what I asked you to do. What did I ask you to do? Think carefully and answer. What did I ask you to do? I asked you to raise your left arm. What are you really doing? You're contracting the muscles of your arm. That is not what I asked you to do. Did you hear me at any point? You go back and rewind the tape and see if at any point I asked you to contract the muscles of your left arm. Did I ask you to do that? So why are you doing that? Why are you doing something I didn't ask you to do? I asked you to raise your left arm and you're contracting the muscles of your arm. That's not what I asked you to do. Okay, put your arm back down. Now I've got to remind myself to do that because I can't see you guys. So, hopefully. In the event I forget to mention to put your arm down, say in about 10 minutes, then please, you can put your arm down, okay? Otherwise, we might have another problem. You'll have your arm up for 3 hours and then you'll say, Swamin Mahansa, because of you now my left arm can no longer, is of no use anymore. So, thank you anyway, I'm free from that problem now. That's not the way I want to free you from the problem. So now let's think about what happened there. I asked you to raise your arm, and what you did was you contracted the muscles of your arm. Isn't that right? How do we know this? Let's go and ask your arm. Imagine we gave your arm a voice. So you can speak, and independently your arm could also speak, right? So your arm can speak independent to you. Let's go ask your arm. What just happened? Why did you go up? Is what we're asking the arm. What are we asking? Why did you go up? What is the arm going to say in response to our question? Why did you go up? If the arm could speak, what would the arm say? What do you think? I think the arm is going to say, hey, there was nothing I could do. I couldn't stop myself. Right? That's what the arm is going to say. Just like you do. Just like you say when you're in front of that cake or Kate, what you're going to, just as you say, I couldn't stop myself. What does the arm say? I couldn't stop myself. And then we ask the arm, why not? Why couldn't you stop yourself? Well, it's these muscles. It's those muscles, you see, those things, they contracted. And there was nothing I could do to stop myself from going up. There was absolutely nothing I could do. And then we ask, but did you try at least? And then the arm goes, are you kidding me? When those muscles contracted, there is nothing on this planet I can do to stop myself from going up. I'm helpless. Nothing I can do, absolutely nothing. Not all the willpower, not all the courage. Right, as this gentleman has said in his message to us. Right, I keep jumping back to it just so we can relate this to the question, because I want you to walk away from this sermon with an answer that you're happy with, sir. What did it say? I don't have the courage to shift my mind from desire to contemplation. So you're saying you don't have courage, right? Just as well, because that's exactly what your arm is saying. I don't have not all the courage that I've got could stop me from going up. It's those muscles. You see those muscles? Just below the elbow is one end, and just by the shoulder is the other end. Go talk to them. Why are you asking me? If going up was an offense, what would the arm say? I am not guilty. I did not do it by intention. It was not my doing at all. There's nothing I could do to stop. I'm speaking in this manner because I know there are young children on the sermon also, and I want them to understand this as well. So really, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to take a very profound concept. I'm trying to simplify it as best I can in both its presentation and in the concept. So adults, if you're thinking, God, so I'll just get to the blooming point. Well, there are young children on the call, on the sermon. So I'm trying to help them also understand the point. 7 years of age, they can get it. I promise you. Problem I have is sometimes, how come they get it and you don't? So, what were you asking the arm? Why did you go up? We told you not to go up. Or rather, we told the arm, don't go up. And the arm could not. What did you ask the arm to do? We asked you to raise your left arm, but really what you're doing is you're contracting your muscles. So what did we do? We moved closer to the arm. And then we asked the arm. We moved closer to the arm and we are inspecting what really happened. So this is an analysis of what happened there. Forensics, if you like. Something went wrong, and we want to find out what went wrong. And we asked the arm, why did you go up? And the arm is saying, I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this. It wasn't me. It was those muscles. Go and talk to them and leave me alone. Wouldn't the arm say that? By arm, I mean everything except for those muscles. Those, the pair of those muscles. I think they're called the biceps and the triceps. Right? If I remember my biology correctly. So, except for those two pairs of muscles, or that pair of muscles, everything else, they're going to say, sorry, it beats me. I don't know how it happened. It wasn't me. I was asleep. I was just minding my own business, and whoa, I just went up. I'm like, what just happened? And it was those muscles. Go and talk to them. All right, let's go talk to the muscles then. All right, let's go talk to the muscles. Muscles, yes. Why did you contract? Why did you contract? Because all we wanted was the arm to go up. But what happened? Muscles contracted. Now, yes, it is the muscles contracted which sent the arm up, but I didn't ask for you to contract muscles. All I asked was for you to raise your arm. So we are working through one by one and seeing, we're trying to figure out, essentially folks, what we're trying to figure out is, where is this I that couldn't stop the myself? Where is that myself that couldn't be stopped? That's what you say, right? I couldn't stop myself. So there's no fault with I. Yeah? There's no fault with I because I wanted to stop. But what couldn't be stopped? The myself couldn't be stopped. So we're going to try to find this myself and, have a word with it. Now, why don't you respect and obey I? How dare you, right? How dare you not obey and respect and listen to every word that I have to say? Why do you act on your own accord? You have to be obedient. Why are you disobedient? Is a question we want to ask myself. So we need to go and find this myself that couldn't be stopped by the I. So we're working our way, started with the arm, then we worked towards the muscles, and now we're asking the muscles, hello muscles, why did you contract? Why did you contract? When you ask these questions of the muscles, and the muscles, if they had a voice of their own, what would the muscles say? What would they say? Well, like any friend, any pair of friends, first they'd say, it wasn't me, it was him. Go and ask the other guy. So the biceps would say that of the triceps, and the triceps would say that of the biceps. Right? But once we've gotten over that, you're both responsible for this. What happened? And then what they would say is, well, we don't know really. We were just minding our own business. We were just chilling. And then there's this current. There's a signal that came from somewhere. It came from this nerve. See, this nerve. It came from this nerve, and those neurotransmitters fired, right? And then that got us all excited, right? And there was nothing we could stop. It's like, if someone were to tickle you, is there any point asking you, why are you laughing? Stop laughing. There's no point in doing that, is there? Because you just can't stop it. When you're excited, and you can't be stopped. And if someone tickles you, you're going to start laughing hysterically. And the only way that can be stopped is, if you say, stop laughing, you're going to have to say, well, can you ask the guy who's tickling me to stop tickling me, please? I can't help it. Likewise, these muscles, if you ask them, why did you contract? They're going to say, it's those neurotransmitters. Or it's that nerve. It carried a message to us. It sent an electrical shock, and we couldn't do anything about it. This is just a reaction. Not in our control. Completely out of our control. So please, leave us alone. Go and talk to whoever sent the signal. And the muscles would say, we couldn't stop ourselves. Right? If they had one voice, again they'd say, I couldn't stop myself. Now we've heard that story before, haven't we? How many times? We heard it twice now. Twice? Yes, you said it first. I couldn't stop myself. Your arm said it next. I couldn't stop myself. Now the muscles are saying the same story. I couldn't stop myself. So, where do we go from here? Well, it seems that when an electric signal comes to the muscles, and they're excited, these motor neurons, they do their work. There is nothing these muscles can do except for contracting and relaxing. So what do we do now? We're going to have to go to the source of the electrical signal. Where did that come from? So via the nervous system, central nervous system, it came right all the way from the brain. It's usually the bad guy for most things. So let's go and talk to the brain. Now for some of you, we're going to have to stop there. No, I'm just kidding. Everyone's got a brain. So we can have that conversation with everyone, right? So we go to the brain. Brain, why did you send a signal to those muscles? Why did you excite that motor neuron and send a signal to those muscles? We're asking the brain. What is the brain going to say? Oh, yeah, I just couldn't stop myself. Isn't the brain going to say the same thing? I couldn't stop myself. And then we might say, well, hey, come on. We've heard that story before, right? The arm said that first. Oh no, actually, Your owner said that first, or whoever claims to be your owner, he said that first, and then your arm said that, the arm said that next, and then the muscles said that next, and then after that, now you're saying it. You couldn't stop yourself. Well, yes, that is the truth. I couldn't stop myself. I just had to send that signal. It's not like I could apply the brakes. I couldn't stop. Like a line of dominoes. If one falls, then if one behind me falls, then I'm going to fall on the one in front of me. There's nothing I can do to stop it. I'm helpless. Don't talk to me. Who's the brain going to say, go and talk to? What do you think? Who's the brain going to say, go and talk to? Any ideas? You're all with me so far, right? This was the arm that was raised. I asked you to raise your arm, and that's not what you did, because I could see your muscles contracting. And therefore I came and asked you, hey, what are you doing? I asked you to raise your arm, why are you contracting your muscles? And then we took a closer view. We zoomed in, and we asked the muscles, hey, hello, why did you contract yourselves? First we asked the arm, and the arm said there was nothing I could do. The muscles contracted and I couldn't stop myself. And then we asked the muscles, why did you do that? And the muscles said what? I couldn't stop myself. Then we went to the brain, which is where we are right now, and we are asking the brain, why did you do that? Why did you send that signal? And the brain saying what? I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't stop myself. We asked, what do you mean you couldn't stop yourself? Well, there was a signal that came to me, a command, and there's nothing I can do. I can't disobey that command. If the command comes in, then I have to honor it. So, please don't ask me this, that, and the other. Please go and ask it, or he, or she that sent the command. Don't know where it came from, but it came from somewhere. Please go to the source and ask the source. Now, where did that come from? Now, those of you, of course, I think most of you will know the answer now. Where did that come from? Remember the old, when we used to talk about the doctrine. Do you remember those sermons? A long time ago, we talked about the 5 sense organs and the sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, right? And those external stimuli. Stimulating the 5 sense organs, and then signals fired, right? And through the brain, they went into the mind. Remember that? So that was the information coming in from the outside world. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch coming in from the outside world. Now, what's happening is, of course, the cake was seen and the arm was raised, wasn't it? So coming in was sight, eye, brain, mind, and then to raise the arm, well, it has to be the reverse then, mustn't it? Mind, brain, and then now muscles and arm. You all with me there? So first we ask the arm, right? We ask the arm first. Why did you do that? Arm said, go, don't talk to me, go talk to the muscles. We asked the muscles. Then muscle said, don't talk to me, go talk to the brain. Then we talked to the brain. And the brain said, don't ask me, go ask the mind. And then we asked the mind. I'll jot it down here. Okay? Somewhere here. Alright? So now we're asking the mind. So now tell me then. We've hit a home run, haven't we? Have we not gone back to our source? Are we not at where it all started? You see, when the mind sends an instruction and the brain receives that instruction, is there anything in this world that the brain can do to disobey the instruction of the mind? Can the brain override the instruction of the mind? Think about those lines of dominoes. Lay down on the floor, one after the other. Right? If this guy falls, what can this guy do to not topple over the one next to it? Right? When this domino falls, what can this do to not topple over the one next to it? There's absolutely nothing. You know this is the principle of Charlie and Freddie? No, cause and effect. This is the principle of cause and effect. When the mind sends a signal to the brain can do nothing other than obey that signal. It may be, however, that sometimes the brain is not fully functional. Perhaps it's indisposed. Maybe there are chemical imbalances. Maybe it's just not the right time of the day. Whatever. There may be some biophysical reasons or biochemical, biophysical reasons as to why the parts of the body cannot respond to the impulse that comes from its predecessor. However, if they are fully functional, there is nothing they can do to not relay that message on. Will you agree with me on that? So when the mind says jump, what does the body have to do? It's got to jump. So when then the mind says raise your arm, what does the body have to do? It's got to raise its arm. Therefore, if you go and ask the arm, why did you raise yourself? Why did you raise yourself? It's fair enough for the arm to say, I couldn't stop myself. Yes or no? If the arm is the I, so we are personifying the arm, right? Then the arm could speak for itself. It's fair enough for the arm to say, I couldn't stop myself because muscles contracted. There is nothing I could do to stop it. Stop this from happening. And then if you went and spoke to the muscles, the muscles could also say, I couldn't stop myself. Because there's a signal that came from the brain, and when that signal gets fired, provided I'm fully functional, provided I've got all the nutrients and all the cells that make me up are functional, and I've got the mitochondria and they're producing the power that's needed for me to go ahead and make those contractions, there is nothing that can be done to stop me. In a sense, what they're saying is, I am driverless. It is not me who's driving me. In a sense, what they're saying is, I am not in charge. I am not in charge. So if I am not in charge, then what's the point of I being there? Right? Think about that. I'm taking this one step at a time. If I am not in charge, meaning I can't stop what happens when there are causes which have already lined up, there is nothing that I can do to stop this from taking place, to stop this event. Does that also not mean that it wasn't... Now, I'm talking about the arm, okay? I'm talking about the arm, and we're having a conversation with the arm. If the arm could not stop itself from moving up, from raising, was it the arm that raised itself? If the arm could not stop itself from raising itself, was it the arm that raised itself? Let me ask you the question in a way that you can more easily relate to, right? Imagine you're a passenger in someone's car. Okay, you're sat in the passenger seat, and there's a driver. So you're essentially, he or she's driving, and you're being driven, right? Now, you can see that a car has just pulled up in front, and you can see in a moment you're going to crash into the car. What are you going to do? You're going to slam on the brakes. But hey, hang on, you're the passenger. Yes, you're still going to slam on the brakes. If you had any experience driving a car, so you know what needs to happen at that moment, as in, if you were in the driver's seat, what you would do is exactly what you would do in the passenger seat. You would slam on the non-existent brakes. You'd do it nevertheless, wouldn't you? But the car crashes into the car up ahead, into the car that pulled up in front. Now here's the thing. You slammed the brakes on time, but the driver didn't. Because say he was looking out somewhere, no, he was not looking straight ahead, and the car just swerved in, and he was looking somewhere else. You slammed the brakes bang on time. Had you been in the driver's seat, the car would have stopped right on time, and a crash could have been prevented. But you were not in the driver's seat. You slammed the brakes on time, but the driver was a couple of seconds too late. Now, all that is fine, but here's my question. How come your slamming the brakes did not stop the car? How come? Because it was not your pressing the pedal that drove the car. That's why. In other words, if you're not the driver, you can't be the one who stops the car. Only the driver can stop the car. Meaning, if you can't stop the car, you're not the driver. If you're not the driver, you can't stop the car. So it works both ways. Right? Let me say that up again, just so it's clear in your mind. When you applied the brakes, you applied the brakes right on time. If you had those pedals under your feet, the car would have stopped in time and the crash could have been prevented. But it couldn't be prevented because the driver, the real driver of the car, the actual driver of the car was 2 seconds too late, and the car had a crash. Now, Why did the car crash when in fact you applied the brakes at the right time? With enough time for the car to stop and some distance spared. Why couldn't the crash be prevented? It's because you are not the driver. So you can't stop something when you're not the driver. Meaning, if you're not the driver, you can't stop it. And if you can't stop it, you're not the driver. So if you're not the driver, in respect to the car being driven, what is your role in the car? Right? Purely from the perspective of the car being driven, what is your role in the car? What is it? Absolutely nothing. Your being in the car has nothing to do with the car being driven or the car stopping or anything for that matter. Because that is why they call you the passenger. You have no control over the movement of the car. That's why you're called the passenger and you're not called the driver. Meaning, your presence there is unnecessary. Your presence is dispensable. Your presence adds nothing. I'm talking about the movement of the car. Okay? Your presence adds nothing. So likewise, when the arm is raised, and we walk up to the arm and ask the arm, why couldn't you stop yourself? It's because it wasn't the arm that raised itself. In other words, the arm is not the driver of the arm. If the arm was the driver of the arm, then the arm could stop the arm from being raised. Do you understand that concept? The arm is not the driver of the arm. So, how is the arm raised? Now you're asking a good question. Instead of asking, who raised the arm? Now you're asking, how was the arm raised? Now, you should remind yourself at this point, if you have a good memory, that was the kind of the question that the Buddha asked, invited his students to ask. Don't ask who, ask how. Remember we talked about this long time ago, when someone spilled some water. I've taught you this in the past. Don't ask the question, who spilled water? Ask, how was it spilled? Those days I used to explain it in a way that you could understand, because I said, there's no point in trying to find who spilled water, because the who can be replaced by someone else and still the water can be spilled. Because if it's the same process, you get the same result. It's a process that determines the result. A process is a lineup of causes in serial fashion. One leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. That is how you have cause and effect. Didn't mean for that to be an F, that should be an E. Cause and effect. So Charlie and Eddie, sorry, not Freddie. It's a lineup of causes. So there is no driver then. In essence, really, the arm is not its own driver. I'll bet 80% of you have got this. But again, as I say, I'm always conscious that my audience is made up of 7-year-olds, sometimes even younger, to 70-year-olds, sometimes even older. Only the other day I was speaking to young Canadians. Last week, we have a monthly sermon to them. And would you believe it, there was among the children there, who I think range between 7, 8 to late 20s. There were children among them who listened to the sermons regularly. And I asked them, what are the magic words? The words that I had uttered in a previous sermon, but I didn't mention in last week's sermon. And they were bang on the money. So that's how I test if you really listen to the sermons, and they proved it. They'd listened to the sermons. Magic words? What are you waiting for? Talking about what are you waiting for? We were waiting for some of you to send us pictures. And some of you had. And I asked for them to be posted on, shared on our Skype group. There's a Skype group, isn't there, for the English sermon listeners. I saw one picture of a rice cooker. And someone had put a sticker on it, what are you waiting for? I was very kind of them to share it as an inspiration to others. So now their rice cooker has the words, what are you waiting for on it? So when you're waiting for the rice cooker to cook your rice, and perhaps the rice cooker manual or on the display it says, your rice will be ready in 20 minutes. There is something else that will be ready in 20 minutes. And that is what you're waiting for. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure others will have done similar. I ask you to be creative. And it's always good to share them among others as a means of inspiration. So, back to the point. This is why I'm trying to simplify this as much as I possibly can. Because I know there are young children listening to this. And they can understand this just as much as the adults can. That I know. Right. So, as a passenger, you can't stop your car because you're not the driver. If you're not the one who's driving the car, you can't be the one who stops the car. To be the one who can stop the car, you also have to be the one who's driving the car. You get that? Yes. Likewise, when you ask the arm, why did you raise yourself? It's fair enough for the arm to say, I couldn't stop myself because I wasn't the one who raised myself, because I wasn't the one who was not raising myself. All this time, it wasn't me who was keeping myself from being raised. It wasn't me who had myself down. That was not my control. It was not my wish. I had nothing to say in this. I had no say in this. That is why we went past the arm and went to the muscles. And we asked the muscles the same question. So, as we moved from arm to muscle, did we not prove that this myself if the myself is the arm, then there is no I here. Because if there is nothing that is keeping the arm down, in other words, if the arm is not keeping itself down, and if the arm is not raising itself up, then the arm has no right to call itself I. Just like, for someone who's in a car, but has no control over its movement, they do not have any privilege to be called the driver. They have no right to be called the driver. There is no reason, no rationale for them to be called the driver. If you are called the driver, then you should be able to stop it, you should be able to move it at your will. And the same concept applies here. You will understand why I'm emphasizing this point when we move a little further ahead to the brain, and then a little further on to the mind. Then a lot of things will become clear to you. That's why I'm spending some time on the arm here, just because then it's just copy and paste from there on. So you get this once, you've got it. Right, so is it not obvious then to us that there is no I in the arm? Because if there was an I in the arm, the I could have stopped the arm, and it would have been able to raise the arm. So the I in the arm would be responsible for its movement, but the arm says, no, there's nothing I could do. There were causes behind me, and when those causes manifested themselves, there was nothing I could do to stop myself. Right? So that's when we moved into the muscles. And the muscles had the same thing to say. Again, it is not the muscles that drive themselves. Therefore, it's not the muscles that can stop themselves. Meaning, there is no driver in the muscles. Meaning, there is no I in the muscles. So if the muscles were the myself, there is no I to stop the myself. But something kept the muscles from moving, and something then eventually moved the muscles. What was that something? That was the electrical signal that came from the motor neuron, which came via the central nervous system and via the spinal cord from the brain, the spinal column. So we went to the brain then and asked the brain the same question. Why did you do this? And again, we are personifying the brain, and the brain saying, I couldn't stop myself. And now then, the moment the brain says, I couldn't stop myself, now we are questioning the validity of this I. Why does the brain call itself I? Is it within its right? Does it have the privilege to call itself I? In other words, that's a driver. Does the brain have the privilege to call itself a driver? Well, let's look. Let's check. If it is the driver, it should be the one that's moving. If it's the driver, it should be the one that's able to stop movement. But when we ask the brain, why did you and you alone get involved in the movement of the contraction of those muscles? What did the brain say? Beats me. I had nothing to do with it. There was nothing that I could do to stop it. It was out of my control. In essence, I am not the driver. So it's driverless. It's driverless. So we are going looking for the driver, aren't we? We are going looking for the driver, aren't we? What is the hypothesis we are trying to test here? The mind is willing. So there is someone who is willing, but the flesh is weak. So the driver wants to stop. Right? But the car doesn't. And that is what is being said here in this hypothesis. The driver wants to stop, but the car won't. Or the driver wants to move, but the car won't. The mind is willing, but the flesh is weak. The opposite of that was the flesh is willing, but the mind is weak. Now, we're going through each part of the flesh, in essence the body, and we are checking, was there any will in it? Was there any will? Was there any willpower when it came to the arm, when it came to the muscles? Did will have anything, as in not will, will, not Jack and Will, right? Will as in the want, the desire. Did will have anything to do with this movement? Intention. Did it have anything to do with the movement? Was there any intention in the muscles? Was there any intention in the arm, in the bones, in the brain? Was there any intention? None whatsoever. It is because there was no intention there, each of them said within air quotes, each of them said, don't ask me, go and ask the guy before me. It's probably him. So we got to the brain so far. Then we move one step forward, or one step back, relatively speaking, and we move to the mind. Right? Now we move to the mind. In the mind, things are happening. Up to this point, we are absolutely clear on the point that if the mind sends a signal to the brain, there is nothing the brain can do except to obey the command. And if the brain receives a signal and it obeys that command, not if, when, it obeys that command, because the brain has no choice in obeying the command, therefore we can't say if the brain obeys the command. There's no choice here. So when the brain forwards that message on to the muscles have no choice again than to obey the commands. And then the muscles have to contract. When the muscles contract, there is nothing the arm can do. It has to raise. So when the causes line up, we can see how the effects are taking place. Now we've come all the way back to the mind. So we've come all the way back to the mind. And now let's ask the mind. So that's where we're going to be scratching our heads wondering, where do we go from here? Right? Where do we go from here? Let's ask the mind. Mind, why did you raise the arm? Now, here's the tricky part. If you ask yourself this question, right, let's bring the cake back into the picture again. It's time for that cake. Okay? And while I'm at it, I just reminded myself that this is not quite how Freud explained this. Just correct myself. What he said was, you had besides the point. Oh, no, we're not going to attain Nibbana, Swami Maharaj, because you explained it incorrectly. No, I'm talking about what Freud said. Right? He said that was the superego. This was the id. And that was the ego. Right? Just to be clear on the point. Either way, essentially what his theory was that you had it was like you had the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, right? The bit you can control and the bit you can't control. Just like what you're feeling here. That's what you're saying here, right? There's a conscious part that I can control, and there's an unconscious part that I can't control. And he tried to explain this in terms of this concept of superego, ego, and id. And what he said was, id was the sort of the carnal side of the mind. Right? It would just go on its whims and fancies, and whatever it wanted, it's all the desires and all the impulsive stuff. That was all the id stuff. The superego was the ethical part of the mind. So this being the non-ethical part of the mind, you couldn't speak out loud the things that came in from the id. And then you had the ego, which kept the two in balance. So that was his theory. But that was his way of trying to explain how this moral battle that happens in the mind when you face the dilemma. How does the mind come to control itself? Okay, and then there were various behavioral patterns of mechanisms, defense mechanisms, as to how the mind would try to reconcile the good and the bad. So he had his own explanation for that. That's besides the point, but what I'm saying is there were people back in the day were also grappled by this problem, and they also wanted to find a solution to this problem. And they went about it this way, some of them. Whereas the Buddha's explanation of this is quite different. So we are at the mind now, and we brought the cake back into the picture. Excuse me. We brought the cake back into the picture, and here the sight of the cake, right? Sight of the cake was what prompted the mind to send that impulse to the brain, was it not? In other words, if you wouldn't extend your arm to pick up something that's not there, would you? Like previously, when we didn't have the cake here, there would not have been a reason to extend your arm. You don't extend your arm to grasp something that doesn't exist. If you did, then they'd take you to a safe place and lock you there until you felt better. Right? So anyone in their sane mind would not be extending their limbs to reach out to grasp or grab something that does not exist. Now, would it not make sense then for us to think of it in these terms? The sight of the cake, right? So, sight of the cake. These are not teardrops, by the way. This is the sight of the cake. Sight of the cake. Now, you know how this happens. We talked about this before, right? Sight comes into contact with the eye, and then again through the processing box, which is the brain, into the mind. Right? That bit we've spoken about before. All that, I think people are reasonably happy with. And people will even say, well, that's all vipaka, right, Swaminatha, so we don't have any problem with that. But, all this other stuff, like those examples that I asked you to come up with a moment ago, where you feel that it is the mind that is willing but the flesh is weak, we're trying to find out what's really going on here. So you see, the sight of the cake, or sight of the cake, was what prompted the mind, because thoughts would have arisen in the mind, wouldn't it? At the sight of the cake, thoughts would have arisen in the mind. Now, what sort of thoughts we'll talk about in a moment. Thoughts of the cake would have arisen in the mind, and following mano sankara, maybe sometimes vachi sankara, but most certainly kaya sankara. These are the formations. It's a bit like turning the cogs for something to happen, right? Thoughts, mental processes, and then Vachi Sankara you could think of as verbal processes and formations, and Kaya Sankara, physical or bodily processes, formations. So this Kaya Sankara is now being driven by the mind. Is that not clear to us now? Because what was our last pit stop? We went and asked the brain, why brain did you send those signals to the muscles? And the brain said, there was nothing I could do to stop myself. The mind said, go, and I had to go. So that proved to us that there is no I that's driving the brain. The brain is being driven by another source. So we came looking for that source and we discovered that it was the mind. Now we're at the mind when we're asking ourselves, is there something driving the mind, or is the mind the driver of it all? That is what we're asking ourselves now. Is there something that's driving the mind, or is the mind the driver? I'm not going to give you the whole story for today, because I want you to take this one piece at a time. Let's take this piecemeal. I want to give you something to think about. That is why I've put that picture of the cake back there, and I'm asking you the question, had it not been for the sight of the cake, would the mind have generated these thoughts as instructions to the brain to send signals to the muscles to contract themselves, to extend the arm, to reach out for the cake? Had the sight of the cake not have happened, had it not happened, right? Had the sight of the cake not happened, would the mind have generated the thoughts, Kaya Sankara, for the brain to extend the arm by contracting the muscles to reach out for the cake? Would that have happened, do you think? Not anyone in their sane mind would do that. If there's nothing to grasp, you wouldn't extend your arm to grasp the thing that does not exist. In which case, do you not see that there is a connection between the sight, which as we know is a vipaka? Do you not see that there's a connection between this vipaka, which is the sight of the cake, and what for now feels like the karma? Right? I can forgive you for thinking that this is the karma for the time being. I will revisit these concepts in future sermons. But for the time being, I can forgive you, you can be forgiven for thinking that this is the karma. But my question being, is it not driven by this vipaka? Had it not been for the vipaka of the cake, the sight of cake, would the mind have generated those thoughts as instructions to the brain to send a signal to the muscles to contract, to extend the arm? Do you not see a loop here? It starts with the cake, to the brain, to the mind, to the brain, to the arm, to the cake. So it starts with the cake, ends with cake. So it starts with vipaka. And for the time being, I'll let you think that it ends with karma. Because you feel that the karma bit here is actually extending your arm to grasp the cake. That is the bit you're saying, I am struggling with, please Swami Nansa, help me. Isn't that right? Because that's what you're saying, the flesh is weak. Right? The mind is very virtuous, is what you're saying. My mind is, God, it's like Mahatma Gandhi, but my flesh is like Adolf Hitler. Please help. My mind is like a saint, but my flesh My body, it's the devil. So you seem to have this grudge against your body, or a grudge with your body, because your body seems to be doing all sorts of mischievous and getting up to no good. Is that fair? Is that a fair assumption or a fair analysis and a fair conclusion of what's going on here? See, was it not the vipaka that prompted the mind to fire up, and then those signals to go into the brain, down to the muscles, to extend the arm, to grasp the cake? So, had it not been for this vipaka, in essence, had the cake not been there, right, I'm going to move the cake back out again. Had the cake not been there, would the mind have generated thoughts to the brain as instructions to contract the muscles, to raise the arm or to extend the arm? Would that have happened? No. I think it's clear to you that. So, for where I want us to get to today, because we just started off trying to prove or disprove the hypothesis. Is the mind willing and the flesh weak, or is the flesh willing and the mind is weak? Now, tell me then, even if you got and understood as far as coming to the mind, right? Even if you got to that point, right? And forget the cake part and the vipaka and how that is what spurs everything into action, right? Even if you leave out that last bit, you can still answer this question. Which part of the body is driving itself? Which part of the body is driving itself? Which part? No part. The body is not driving itself. Each and every part of the body, if engaged in movement, that movement is the result of causes. And those causes, when you line up, it appears that the mind is at the root of it all. So, in which case, going back to the question, when it comes to some desires, the body reacts before the mind. So it's so hard to remind my mind of the foolishness of indulgence. Right. Do we have now enough evidence to, well, you tell me, accept or reject that theory? When did the body act on its own accord? When has it ever made decisions for itself? When did the arm ever go fishing by itself? When did the arm ever extend itself with no stimulus, with no instruction coming from the mind? So is it ever possible then because, it is, as I said, from time to time when things happen, what sort of things? Like the things that we took examples of earlier. When things happen, it's easy for the mind to think, or it is easy for us to think that, I'm so virtuous, I'm so diligent, and I'm so disciplined. But look at the body, it's so disgusting. Look at what you just did. And you tell the body off for it. But there is nothing in the body that happens without the mind driving it all. So even if things are happening in quick succession, it is still the mind that is driving all of it through the creation of mano sankara. And those mano sankara, these are, or rather, kaya sankara. This kaya sankara is a product of the mind. Kaya sankara is a product of the mind. That is why when the mind enters the jhanic states, in particular the fourth jhanic state, remember, it is the mind that enters the jhanic state, not the body. When the mind enters the fourth jhanic state, then all kaya sankara comes to a stop. So then, that is like the mind going into hibernation. Not quite. You could think of it as the mind, as the mind going into sleep or hibernation would be the likes of the ninth jhana, which is the Nirodha Samapatti. But we're talking about the aspect of the mind which is responsible for providing energy to drive the body, that department, if you like, that division goes into hibernation. So it's like, imagine it's an organization and there are various departments that drive various aspects of this entity. So some department, there's one department that's responsible for the thinking, another department responsible for speech, and another department responsible for bodily actions. Well, the department that's responsible for the bodily actions, the Ministry of Bodily Actions, right, they go into hibernation in the fourth jhana. This is the mind that does that. When the mind goes into the fourth jhana, the samapatti, the absorption state, then kaya sankara comes to a stop. So, let us first, the whole point of this explanation has been, as I said right at the beginning of the sermon, before we fix a problem, we first need to identify where the problem is. Are you all in agreement then that this notion that the mind is willing but the flesh is weak is entirely flawed? But it is one that people have learned to say. People have come to use that, and I've heard it many times used in society where people will often offer that as an excuse. I tried my best. I tried my best. I honest to you, I swear to God, I tried my best. It was not me. It was something within the body that just completely possessed me. Yeah, you can't blame me for it. I'm not responsible. It was this, I don't know, it's this finger. Curse the finger. No, it was never like that. It was never like that. It has been the mind all along. If you ask me, that is good news. Because the Buddha does not teach us a method to tame the body. He teaches us a method to tame the mind. It is the disciplining of the mind through which the rest of it happens. The Buddha says in the Dhammapada, Kayana sangvaro sadhu, sadhu vachaya sangvaro. Manasa sangvaro sadhu. Sadhu sabbata sangvaro. Sabbata sanguto bhikkhu. Sabba dukkha pamucchati. The superficial meaning, and there's a much deeper and profound meaning which we will talk in future. Kayana sangvaro sadhu, restraint of the body, is good. Sadhu vachaya sangvaro, good is restraint of speech. Manasa sangvaro sadhu, restraint of the mind is good. Sadhu sabbata sangvaro, restraint of all is good. Sabbata sanguto bhikkhu, one who has restrained it all is a bhikkhu. Sabba dukkha pamucchati, and frees himself from all suffering. Essentially, what he's saying, if you dig deeper into those words, and which we will do in future sermons, what he's essentially saying is, go and try and find the I that's not able to stop myself. That's what he said by Sabbata sangvaro bhikkhu. Sadhu sabbata sangvaro. Go and find this I who claims to be the driver. Go and find the driver, if you can, and tame him. Tame the driver. Once you've tamed the driver, now we have a bhikkhu. One who has surpassed all suffering. See, this is exactly what we are doing here with our study. Trying to find the driver. Trying to find this self that couldn't stop myself. Trying to find the I that couldn't stop myself. So far we've gotten as far as the mind. And hopefully you'll agree with me that we can no longer make this claim that the mind is willing but the flesh is weak. Any action that is intentional is entirely the responsibility, categorically 100% the responsibility of the mind. Will you accept that? It is on that premise that any further discussion is worthwhile. So really, all we can say is, the flesh is willing. The flesh was always willing. But the mind is weak. In the case of an arahant, the flesh is willing. What, just after he became an arahant? No, he was always willing. But now the mind is strong. Why? The mind has been restrained. The mind has been tamed. And therefore now words as well as actions appear to be tamed. And that's because behind the curtains, the driver, the conductor, the orchestrator, that is the mind, has been tamed. Tamed how? That we'll talk about later.